Hello, I'm James Barth from Rock Hard 4x4, and today I'm going to talk about our XJ fuel tank skid. This is a fuel tank skid that is made out of 3/16 steel. This fuel tank skid is cut and designed so that clearance is real close to your factory fuel tank. It mounts across the 3 bolts in the back, which is going into the metal here on the back of your vehicle, and then the 2 on each side in the front. The 3 bolts here are already there in the frame of your vehicle. These 2 will have to drill on each side, but to know the placement of this, we're going to go ahead and mount it on the back. Now, there is a little bit of variances in the different years of XJs in the fuel tank. So, on certain years, you will use these spacers that go here. This will space it down to make it so that these will meet to the frame in the front. We're going to go ahead and start with the install by mounting it across the back to decide if we need these spacers by how it comes up to the frame in the front. Now, we're going to go ahead and talk to you about something. The fuel tank skid is slightly wider than the factory plastic shield here. Now, we have had many customers over the years remove this plastic shield, but we're going to go ahead and just trim it with some nice heavy-duty pair of scissors and or a pair of cutters. It cuts fairly easy. And we're just going to go ahead and trim it straight with the edge of the tank. Now we went ahead and set it in place. One thing that makes it a little bit easier is if you drop it down on this side, you can bring it around so that it clears the exhaust on the passenger side to bring it up in place. Now, we have it tucked against the fuel tank as tight as it can be, and we still have a little bit of space here, so we are going to need the spacers on this particular model. We're going to go ahead and install those now, which will align everything up. We took a punch, aligned the holes together, we'll drop the bolts down, put the nuts on them, and then we'll go ahead and mark our front brackets on each side so that we can drill them and go ahead and show you how to install these nut inserts. Now, when we slid this fuel tank skid in place, this bracket here on the passenger side kind of interferes with the exhaust. But if you drop the fuel tank skid down on the driver's side, you can bring it up in place and then go ahead and put it in place. Now, we've went ahead and installed the spacers in between the lip of the fuel tank skid and the mounting area of the fuel tank skid on the body. We're going to go ahead and put the longer bolts in with flat washers on the top and on the bottom and the locking nuts. Now, if you don't need the fuel tank spacers, you will use the shorter of the bolts provided. Now what I've done is I've dropped the bolts down from the top, and I have the spacers in here, and I'm just bringing it up slowly at a little bit, which you can do with a floor jack on the ground or an adjustable screw stand like here, and just line up everything, get the bolts to come through. Now leave these bolts loose, but go ahead and install the washer and the lock nut on each one. It may be easier to drop a socket from the top or something to hold the top of the bolt while you start these in place. Now we've went ahead and started the nuts and bolts here across the back. That holds it in place. We're going to go ahead and center it side to side in the frame rail in the front. We're going to go ahead and tighten it up against the actual frame, where we're going to go ahead and take and drill the holes with a 1/2 inch going up each side. Once we have the bolt holes drilled, we'll go ahead and show you how to install the nut inserts. Now, when you're drilling the holes up into the frame, we're using a 1/2 inch bit. As we lined it up both sides, went ahead and drilled through the frame, and we're going to install the nut inserts. Now, we've had some questions as far as how do I drill the right side, passenger side, with the exhaust in the way. We went ahead and removed the clamp here on the hanger and went ahead and removed the rubber on the hanger right ahead of the rear axle. This allowed us to pull the exhaust over out of the way so that we could get the drill in there to drill those holes. Now we're going to go ahead and install the nut inserts. What we'll do to do that is we will lower the skid plate back down in the front. That'll allow us to slip this gold piece up in the frame, and with this tensioner piece. This piece is provided in your hardware kit. You're going to use a 1/4 inch Allen and a 9/16 inch end wrench. What you do is you're going to put this in the frame, hold this, take your Allen and tighten it in place. This will mushroom this tensioner inside the frame and install threads. Go ahead and do that in all 4 areas. now that we've went ahead and installed these nut inserts in here, something to keep in mind is when you are tightening the bolts that are going into nut inserts, don't use an air impact. Just do them by hand. Just go ahead and snug them up in place. We're going to go ahead and remove our tool, go ahead and reinstall our exhaust back in place so we can go ahead and put the skid plate buttoned up. Or I should say, now that we've went ahead and put the nut inserts in place on each side, we're going to go ahead and remove the nut insert tool and go ahead and bring the skid plate back in place and go ahead and start the bolts on each side, but keep everything loose. We're using a 1/2-inch socket, and we're going to go ahead and tighten the bolts on the front on each side, or I should say the brackets on each side, and then we'll go ahead and tighten the ones across the back. All these are tightened using a 1/2-inch end wrench and or socket. Don't forget to reattach your exhaust hanger on the rubber and on the clamp in the back, which made it accessible for us to drill the holes and put this bracket in. To tighten these back 3 bolts, I'm using a 1/2-inch socket and a 1/2-inch end wrench. Now it is a wobbly, which is allowing me to get in there at a little bit of an angly. A little bit of an angly.